Thank you. I have to start out by saying this isn't like any other experiment I've ever done. This is so much more fun. So if this is what science experiments are like, I can understand why I'm in science. But I do want to thank everybody for being here. I'd like to thank the committee for making this experiment so successful. It's not always the case, but it is clearly the case here. And I'm very grateful to all of you for being here, particularly on this rainy night, and the fact that there aren't even enough seats here. So I'm very grateful that you're here to see me. I don't know all of you. I've had the chance to meet some of you both before tonight and tonight, but I do know one thing about all of you, and that's that each and every one of you has been impacted by breast cancer. It doesn't matter if I don't know you, but I know that it's either been your family member, your mother, your coworker, your neighbor, your cousin, your friend. Every single person in this room has been impacted by breast cancer. I too was impacted by breast cancer, but my journey with breast cancer started at a very young age. At the age of 12, my mother disappeared, and it was in the 1970s. So we didn't know where she went. I have two brothers, and we didn't know where she went, but we knew one thing when she came home is that she was never the same person, that there was a spark that was missing, a bit of joy that was gone. And what we learned is that she had left at the age of 33 to have surgery, and in those days it was truly mutilating surgery for breast cancer. Now, I do have to say that as a little girl, as a young girl who was not raised to go to medical school. I wasn't even born in this country, but neither of my parents were born in this country. My brother and I all of us were the first to go to college in our family. And I was actually raised to marry a nice Jewish guy, which I did. But I said as a young girl that I didn't want other 12-year-olds to have to go through what I went through, and that I was going to make a difference. And I went to medical school, and it was a very exciting time in medical school because it was the time that mammography was just being implemented. And New York was really the center, where I was in medical school was really the center of mammography. And so I decided that I really wanted to be part of that, because then we couldn't cure breast cancer, and now we don't yet have the opportunity to prevent breast cancer. But breast cancer is a curable disease when it's caught early. If it's only in the breast, 95% of men, and as you heard before, of women and men are cured of breast cancer. And so I trained in radiology. I became the director of breast imaging at Johns Hopkins. And once again, my foray into breast cancer took a bit of a turn. So although I was privileged to take care of so many women and really felt that I was making an impact by following my dream of hoping that other young girls wouldn't be impacted as I was, since we had gotten so much better at diagnosing early curable breast cancer. And one of my responsibilities was determining what kind of equipment we were going to buy. And so what I used to do is, when I was charged with finding the best new ultrasound equipment, what I would do is I would ask all the vendors to bring their newest equipment in, leave it there, and at the end of the day, when it was quiet, I would look at myself, I would look at the image quality and decide what piece of equipment we would buy. So that night, not only did I figure out what piece of equipment I was gonna buy, but I found my own breast cancer when I was using that equipment as well. And so people would say to me, well, how did you feel? And I'd say, well, I felt so lucky, because I spend my days taking care of women who don't have the great fortune that I did of understanding what I wanted and where I was going to go. They have to fill that vat of information very quickly, and I know that many of you in this room had to do that, and I can only hope that I might have been part of that for some of you, to sort of skid the path, to make it easier to get the information you need to find the best solution for you. But so what I ended up doing, and one other thing I have to tell you is that I had a mammogram 2 weeks earlier, and it was completely normal. So that was, we always knew that mammography is not perfect, but we'll talk more about that. And so what I decided to do is have bilateral mastectomies. That's not the right solution for everybody. It was the right solution for me. At that time, my children were 12 and identical twins that were 9. Now I want to say that my daughter, the 12-year-old, is now this magnificent woman who's here this evening, who's also on the Brem Foundation board, and has also had a very interesting journey with breast cancer. And so what I did is I actually had bilateral mastectomies. Now, I told you I had twins, and I nursed those twins. So after you nurse twins, or even singletons sometimes, things go south. And I went very south after nursing the twins. And so what happened is there are some very beautiful parts of breast cancer, as hard as that is to believe. But when I woke up from my reconstruction, I was Barbie. And so I went from south to Barbie in one easy step. Now, the other thing that was very interesting is that it was weeks before Andrea, who's here, Andrea Wolf, her bat mitzvah. Now, the dress is very important for the bat mitzvah. And I didn't have one because I was a bit preoccupied with other things that were going on. But after I had gotten out of the hospital, I did find the dress, and it was a beautiful event, and it was a source of great joy in our lives, and there is reason to celebrate even during the process of breast cancer. This was after my surgery, before my chemotherapy. And so I must say that I got dressed that night, and I am married to the nicest guy imaginable. And he has been a great partner in this path with me. So that night I got dressed for the party, and I put on my dress. And I came out, and he looked at me, and he said, "You look so beautiful, but I've never seen you wear a dress that's cut that low." And I looked at him, and I said, "I paid for these, and I'm showing these." And that's true. And anyone who's been in my house knows that the largest picture of me in my house is this huge picture that night in that dress in my dining room. And I would welcome anyone to come see it because it brought me great joy. But it also, when I came to DC, the reason I came to DC was because there really wasn't a state-of-the-art woman-focused breast program. And one of the things that's most important, and many of you know this in this room, is breast cancer is a curable disease. It is not a death sentence. And my mother, who at 33 had breast cancer, lived another 40 years and passed away this past December. And she ended up having metastatic ovarian cancer, and thank God for the goodness of great medicine that we had her for 40 more years, 45 more years. So I've been the benefactor of great medicine as well on many different levels. But the reason I came to GW is because we really didn't have in this region a state-of-the-art woman-focused cutting-edge breast program. And that woman-focused part is really critical. The reason that's critical is because nobody knows you like you know you. And you have to advocate for yourself. Whether it's going to the place that has the newest technology for breast imaging and you have the right to ask, or knowing that you can ask who is interpreting your mammogram. And just like anybody who does more of anything is better at that, you don't want someone who does mammography one day a month and is doing chest x-rays the next day and neuro CTs. Not that there's anything wrong with that to interpret somebody else's mammogram. But for your mammogram, you want someone who interprets mammography at least half the time, if not more. Why? Because if you do something a lot, you do it better. And we know that that's true at George Washington and at some of the other places in town. 100% of the breast imaging is done by physicians who do 100% breast imaging. And the result is that the cancers that we diagnose at GW are smaller, earlier, and more curable than that at the national average. And we have a national average, the SEER data. But that clap should be for you because you are the ones who need to know that you have the right to ask that. The other thing is that nobody knows you like you know you. And if something is wrong, even if the doctor tells you it's okay, it's not okay. You need to go someplace else. You need to seek another advice. You need to make sure that you're okay. I can't tell you how many times, particularly in younger women, women will come and say, I went to my doctor 8 months ago and they said it was okay. It's not okay. You must advocate for yourself. You must know where you're getting your exam, who's reading it, and if something's wrong, you must advocate for yourself. And so at GW, the reason that I was inspired to go there is because we really believe in no sleepless nights and empowering women. If you need a breast biopsy, you should never go to the operating room. 100% of breast biopsy should be done with image guidance and a needle, which doesn't require an IV, doesn't require going to sleep. It's much like going to the dentist. It's more accurate, it's better, and your outcome is better if you have a minimally invasive image-guided biopsy. And you need to know that, because if you are told that, heaven forbid, you need a biopsy, or someone you love or someone in your life is told, and they get told that they're going to go for surgical biopsy, the answer is no. That's not the way to do it. Now, if you ask me why does somebody do it, I'll give you the answer that I give so many of my patients. I have enough trouble figuring out what I'm going to do. I don't know why somebody else is going to do something else. But I can tell you that nobody should go to the operating room for a diagnosis of breast cancer. Now, I want to go back to talk about DC. We live in a magnificent part of the country. We live in the seat of power in this country. We also live in the area that has the highest death rate from breast cancer in the country. And that's a travesty, particularly for those of us who live in this area. And that's why, again, it's so important for you to know that, so that you know that you can go empower yourself and get the best care that you deserve. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy about mammography, a lot. And if there's one message I can send to you today, it's please, the women in this room over the age of 40, get your mammograms. They are life-saving. And so you'll say to me, but what is it that I'm reading in the newspaper? Well, I'm not going to go through the data because Sue tells me that when I go through the statistics, it's boring. But I can tell you that every single one of those studies will show that if you don't get a mammogram every year, more American women will die. It will cost less. It may not be cost effective, but could you please raise your hand if you think you're not worth saving your life for? Because the answer is we are all deserving of the best care. And if you don't get your mammogram every year, more women will die. Breast cancer diagnosed early is curable. The later it's diagnosed, the harder it is to diagnose it. Get your mammogram every year. And do self-examination. Even though you hear it doesn't help, I can't tell you how many times a week someone will come in and say, I felt this, and it turns out to be a cancer. So don't you deserve that? It doesn't cost anything. There's no radiation. It doesn't impact health care. Do it. Do it every month. Do it the same day, either the same day of your cycle or the same day of the month. Now, one other thing that you really need to know about is that even if your mammogram is normal, it's not a guarantee that you don't have breast cancer. Mammography, the death rate from breast cancer in America has decreased by almost a third in the past 20 years. That's extraordinary. That's due to better treatment and better screening. But mammograms are not perfect. And of women who have breast cancer, the cancers are seen in 85% of women. But in women who have something called dense breast, which was me, I had a normal mammogram 2 weeks before my cancer was diagnosed. Why is that? Well, women who have dense breast tissue means that they have white breast tissue. And breast cancer is white. And so there's no contrast on a mammogram between a cancer and a breast tissue. And let me show you here that, do I have a pointer? No? Okay, so I'm going to show you that the breasts on top are not dense. They're kind of dark. And that big white thing in the middle, that's a cancer. I can tell you that there's a cancer in the breasts below it's just as big, but you can't see it because there's a white cancer in white breast tissue, and it's like trying to find a cloud in the cloud-filled sky. You can't see it. And in women who have dense breast tissue, mammograms miss a third of breast cancers. But you should still get it. It's kind of like trying to find that little guy. There's no contrast between him and the snow. Can I have the next slide? So mammography in everybody, 85%. In women with dense breasts, 65%. A third of breast cancers are not seen. And so if you say, well, does that impact me? The answer is yes. Breast density decreases with age. 75% of women in their 40s have dense breasts, but over a third of women in their 70s have dense breasts, and 40% of all American women have dense breast tissue. So does it impact you? Yes. And you can't, come to the next slide, you can't tell if you have dense breasts except by a mammogram. You can have perky dents, you can have saggy dents. It doesn't matter what you feel like, it doesn't matter what you look like, except what you look like on a mammogram. Now, it's really great that women are being empowered, and there are now 18 states. Maryland is one of them, Virginia is another, and we actually have some of the legislators who are instrumental in implementing that legislation, are part of the foundation, have been involved with the foundation, and now there is a national law bill before the Senate and Congress to make people, by law, women must be informed of what their breast density is. And there's two other issues about breast density. One is, not only does it make your mammogram harder to read, but if you have dense breast tissue, you have a 4 to 6 times higher risk of developing breast cancer. So it's the perfect storm. Mammograms aren't as effective, although they're still very important, and your risk is higher. So what can you do? We have other modalities that can find these mammographically hidden breast cancers. Ultrasound works, MRI works, and something that only we at GW have called molecular breast imaging or breast-specific gamma imaging work in women with dense breasts as well as in women with non-dense breasts. So there are ways, and now women who have dense breast tissue should say, okay, thank you for telling me that, but I want more. I want more. I want to find these. And so I'm very fortunate that I had the privilege of leading a trial looking at 15,000 women across the country. And they had normal mammograms, normal physical examinations, dense breasts, and we found that ultrasound doesn't hurt, doesn't have radiation, very cost effective, finds almost 30% more cancers. These cancers would have been found eventually because they're potentially killer cancers, they're invasive cancers. They would have been found larger, later, and more node positive. But we find them earlier with ultrasound. So what do? If you're told you have dense breast tissue, you say, I want to be screened with ultrasound so we can find these mammographically hidden cancers. So let me tell you a little bit about the Brem Foundation, how it started. So what happened is about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, the hospital GW, we were the first in this area to do breast MRI, and you need a special coil. So they bought the coil for me and we started doing it. But they didn't buy the biopsy device that would allow me to biopsy the lesions that we saw with MRI. And you can say, well, how could that be? Well, I can assure you there is no hospital in this country or in the world that has everything. Everybody makes choices. And so what would happen is I started imaging women with MRI, very sensitive technique to find breast cancer. And there were about 15 women who had something in their breast, and I couldn't find it, but it was really troublesome. So that nice guy that I told you that I was married to, well, I used to wake him up in the middle of the night, and I'd say to him, yeah, Henry, what am I going to do with these women, these 15 women? So I called the CEO of the startup that made this biopsy device, actually a very dear friend, Joe Mark. And I said, Joe, listen, could you send that device down to me? Let me biopsy these 15 women. I'll send it back to you. And when I have the money, I'll send you a check. And he said, you know, Rachel, I have a better idea. I'm going to send you the device. You keep it there. And when you have a check, you send it to me. So that was the message. And so I was thrilled. But then I had to do something I had never done before, which is raise money. And to my good fortune, my path crossed with people who now are instrumental in the Brem Foundation, women who have organized this, women whose heart and souls are absolutely in the right place. And so within 3 weeks, we had the money to buy the MR biopsy device. So the result from that was easy. We can do that. We have so many more needs. As part of my job, I run the George Washington Mobile Mammography Program. It's a program that's designed to break down every barrier to give life-saving mammography to the underserved community. We have a mobile van that goes out to the communities. We partner with community leaders and faith-based leaders, so they work to inspire their community to come on the van. The mammograms are free. We have bilingual patient navigators. We have culturally sensitive approaches. And it's really been a privilege to run that. But there were women that sometimes had to wait up to 6 months for a biopsy when their mammogram was abnormal, when they were uninsured. And that wasn't right. There's something so wrong about that. So I spoke to the people who helped with the biopsy device, and they said, same answer, no problem, we can do that. And that's how the Biopsy Fund started. So now we have patient navigators who help find programs for these women, but if it takes more than 2 weeks, the Biopsy Fund funds the biopsy of these women, and even with the Affordable Care Act, there are very high deductibles. There are women who remain uninsured. There are unregistered Americans. There are still women who don't have insurance, and so the Biopsy Fund is still very robust. The other thing at GW, and this is something that you should know as well, is women who have newly diagnosed breast cancer, if they have an MRI or a BSGI, physiologic approaches to finding cancer. It looks at how cancer functions instead of how it looks. We find in 10% of women another cancer that we wouldn't have known about. And so at GW, unlike, I dare say, virtually every other program in this area, 100% of women with a newly diagnosed breast cancer have an MRI or BSGI before they go to surgery. So we know all the areas of cancer, and they can get treated at one time. But Medicaid doesn't cover that for the underserved community. So the foundation now supports MRIs and BSGIs in underserved women who with newly diagnosed breast cancer. The other thing that the foundation does is we are very passionate about breast density, and ultrasound is very important in finding these additional cancers in women with dense breasts. So we at GW have something called automated whole breast ultrasound, where both breasts are looked at in its entirety, where it gives the physician the opportunity to interpret the entire examination and find these 30% more cancers. And for women who that isn't covered and make twice the poverty level or less, the Brem Foundation will support automated whole breast ultrasound. And so we really believe in the righteous care of everyone. Now I have to tell you that the foundation was growing and doing these incredibly impactful things. And really, I'd never seen a foundation that has been so impactful with virtually no overhead. And so the foundation said to me, I think you really have to go to other cities. And I said, I can't. I take care of patients 5 days a week. And although I love spending my nights and my weekends doing the right thing, there are only 7 days in a week. And so we were trying to think about how to do this. And again, a miracle happened, if you believe in that. What happened is in rural North Carolina, a woman was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so she called her closest friend, who happened to be up here, and said, I was just diagnosed with breast cancer. And she said, well, you have to come up and see Dr. Brem. She said, I don't want to come up and see Dr. Brem. I love my doctors in North Carolina. She goes, no, you have to come up and see Dr. Brem. So I guess she bugged her enough that she said, okay, I'll come see Dr. Brem. So she called her wonderful doctor in North Carolina, Dr. Baker, and she said, look, I'm really sorry. I'm so grateful for the care you gave me. It was outstanding. But my friend is driving me crazy, and she's going to go make me see this doctor in Washington named Dr. Brem. So there was silence on the other end of the phone, and she goes, are you kidding me? Dr. Brem trained me. I came down here 6 months ago. And that was the answer. And so now the Brem Foundation supports 2 fellows. You can obviously see that they're not fellows. It's a fellowship. But we do train men as well. And what they are board certified radiologists. They're the ones that they're trained like physicians that you would see in all the practices in town. They're fully board certified, and they come to spend a year with us to learn the optimal care of women for the diagnosis of using all these new modalities for the diagnosis of early curable breast cancer. And it is the only breast imaging fellowship in the country that has a required community service outreach. They are here tonight because they want to be, but perhaps because they have to be as well. And the goal is, and we've seen this happen, they stay with us for a year, and they go to all the 4 corners of this country, and they bring with them not only the expertise of breast imaging, but the commitment that you must reach out to your community, educate women, empower women so that you can find early curable breast cancer, because this is a team sport. Nobody can do this alone. And so that was the answer. And now the Brem Foundation supports 2 fellows. It costs us just under $90,000 a year for the salary and benefits of each fellow, and the impact from that has been endless, and we are very, very committed to that. And so so that is what the Brem Foundation has done. Basically, in a nutshell, it has been the most impactful foundation in terms of care of women who cannot afford the proper care, educating, empowering women, and spreading this message throughout our country by our fellows. Now, I just want to say one more thing. This is a very special event for me in many ways. I'm very grateful that we have the representation of so many men. There are always men at Brem events, but this is really spectacular because nobody goes through breast cancer alone. And I've mentioned my husband through so much of it, and I couldn't have gotten through either the training or what I do on a day-to-day basis or my own journey through breast cancer without him. So those men who are here, I thank you for supporting the incredible women that you have here. I'll clap for that. And it is true that 1% of breast cancer occurs in men, particularly men who have the BRCA gene. And my daughter is here, Andrea. I pointed her out before. And so, lest you think that the journey of breast cancer ends, I don't often say this, but I have 3 daughters, right? God has a funny sense of humor. I have the 3 most wonderful daughters. But, I remember when I had breast cancer, I said to myself, my daughters are never going to have to go through this because we're going to have this licked by then. So Andrea is 31. She lets me say that because she does. But Andrea had prophylactic mastectomies 2 years ago now and has had her 3rd daughter since that. So I wish I could tell you that that wasn't true, that we had done everything we can, that my prophecy, which didn't come through when I found out about my breast cancer, would be true, but it's not. But I have every intention of that being true for her 3 beautiful young daughters, that they won't have to go through what her mother went through or what her grandmother went through. Yeah. And it's only by the support and the help of people like you that we can help the underserved community, that we can find out about breast density, that the research funds that the Brem Foundation has raised has supported the work on women with dense breast tissue using BSGI and ultrasound, allowing all women to get the best chance they can, working to explain the importance of of knowing yourself, of empowerment, and really allowing us to do this. And I often don't ask, but you will hear this again tonight. We couldn't do it without your support. We couldn't do it without your support of the extraordinary Norbeck team who made this event, this Not Enough Chairs event possible. Yeah. But we also couldn't do it without your financial support. And so you will hear more about that. And I hope that you will know that every dollar that's raised is used extremely responsibly, has been incredibly impactful programmatically, and really impacts the lives of women. So for instance, the women on the mammo van, virtually every cancer found on the van has been an early curable breast cancer. And that's particularly important everywhere, but certainly in our community where the death rate for breast cancer is so high. So I want to thank you very much. It's been an extraordinary experiment for me, best experiment I've ever done. I don't know that, and probably would be the most impactful paper if I wrote it and published that one. But I do want to thank you all for being here. I will be around if you have any questions to ask, and I thank you all for your time.